Elaborate on the subsidy reforms that have been going on in India for past 3 to 4 years and identify the challenges in reforming the next target for reforms, i.e., fertilizer subsidy. Discuss what Shanda Prasad panel has recommended about it. Hint: fiscal consolidation targets almost always target subsidies first, as they are most responsive and dynamic. India has been taking lot of measures in past 5 years to rationalize subsidies. Major subsidy reforms in Indian LPG. In 2012, the Government of India embarked on a direct benefit transfer scheme for LPG, the Pratyaksha Astantara Blad PAHAL program. Through a series of reforms, the government brought the price of LPG sold to domestic consumers up to the market level. At the same time, through the PAHAL program, it gave subsidies directly to consumers in the form of cash transfers to their bank accounts. This eliminated the incentive to divert subsidized domestic LPG to non-subsidized sectors, leading to a reduction of leakages. The program also generated sufficient savings to pay for itself by the end of its first year in operation. Diesel subsidy reform. India completely removed subsidies for diesel by deregulating domestic retail diesel prices and allowing them to link to international prices. India was the first country in Asia to eliminate fuel price subsidies. At the end of 2014, the government fully deregulated diesel prices. This was the completion of a longer-term strategy to gradually increase diesel prices that was launched before the fall in crude prices. Fertilizer. Government decided to fast-track the implementation of the direct benefit transfer system for payment of fertilizer subsidy to farmers. The aim is to make the transactions digital between the farmer and the fertilizer company. GS score 2.8 hints. Indian economy. This will also allow them to possibly see where the consumption is happening. If some farmers are buying these fertilizers in excess, that can also be checked. The system could help in stopping smuggling by alerting the authorities about abnormal purchases by individuals, prompting investigations. Kerosene. The government has taken further steps to gradually reduce subsidy on kerosene, continuing the series of market-oriented reforms that have galvanized the petroleum sector and attracted big-ticket investment after an era of excessive controls, controversies, and untargeted subsidies that made it difficult for private companies to operate. It has asked state oil companies to keep raising prices of subsidized kerosene by 25 paise every fortnight until the subsidy is eliminated, or until further orders. Challenges in fertilizer subsidy. To plug leakages in India's annual outlay of Rs 70,000 crore on fertilizer subsidies, the government embarked on ambitious reforms in 2016. The reforms rested on the use of 3 databases: land ownership records, soil health cards, and Aadhaar, but these failed. The way government is promoting farming, it is totally different from ecological farming. It has become a game of only 3 chemicals: NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Plants require at least 17 elements for their growth. Overusage of fertilizer is a bigger challenge than subsidy. Government is selling compost at a particular price, and same is the rate for urea, so this would not push the farmers towards organic farming. These subsidies will only help fertilizer companies to sustain their business, but in the long run, farmers' business will be hampered because his input costs will continuously increase with inversely proportional output rates. Shanda Prasad panel recommendations on fertilizer subsidy. Shanda panel recommended India should give direct cash subsidy of Rs 5,000 to 10,000 per hectare to farmers' UID linked January account. Then farmer will judiciously use N, P and K fertilizers and even organic manures, according to requirements of his soil crop requirements. This would help plug diversion of urea to non-agricultural uses as well as to neighboring countries, and help raise the efficiency of fertilizer use. It may be noted that this type of direct cash subsidy to farmers will go a long way to help those who take loans from money lenders at exorbitant interest rates to buy fertilizers or other inputs, thus relieving some distress in the agrarian sector. There are farmers who do not use fertilizers like organic farmers, so they don't benefit with fertilizer subsidy. Possible steps to be taken. 1. The momentum for these changes has to be created through robust policies. 2. State governments and central government need to work in tandem to encourage farmers for ecological farming. GS score. Hint: Indian economy 29. 3. Particularly in Western Punjab and Punjab, the farmers need to move away from wheat and rice because the groundwater has depleted. For farmers have to be educated and taught to change their cropping pattern and move to multiple cropping. 16. Elaborate on the necessary scientific and infrastructure advancement needed in country to reach the stage where monsoon can be good or bad, but agricultural output needn't be. What role biotechnology can play into it. Hint. Despite its globally acknowledged prowess in the science and technology sectors, India breaks into a sweat each time the southwest monsoon, the subcontinent's tenuous lifeline, which showers its benediction between June and September, delays its arrival. With the changing profile of a monsoon's short cloudbursts rather than a long spell of rain, the long dry periods in between enhance the risk of flooding and, paradoxically, drought as well. How can scientific advancement help agriculture not be relying on monsoons? Local governments provide weekly and bi-weekly agro-net advisories for farmers so that the latter may tweak their agricultural practices according to weather forecasts. Such innovative approaches can go a long way in reducing the country's unhealthy dependence on monsoons while putting a smile on every farmer's face. Indian research needs to be strengthened in the area of agronomy to study the frequency and seasonality of rains and how that knowledge can be transmitted to help the farmer's perspective. Farmers should be educated about the latest techniques in rainwater harvesting so that water can be captured, stored, and distributed more effectively during lean periods. Easier access to microfinance to provide small loans to farmers can also be transformative. According to Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 2013, simple water harvesting and conservation measures, micro-irrigation, watershed management, and insurance coverage can reduce the majority of the potential loss due to drought. Drought strategies should be extended to the village level. For example, each village should have a village pond created under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Conservation farming and land agriculture should be promoted. Each village should be provided timely rainfall forecasts along with weather-based forewarnings regarding crop pests and epidemics in various seasons. Afforestation in a biodiverse manner should be encouraged to help modify regional climates and prevent soil erosion. Biotechnology and agriculture. Agricultural biotechnology consists of many traits and techniques, of which the genetic modification is the most popular. Apart from this, there are many other tools like dihaploids, tissue culture, and others which are biotech tools used extensively to improve plant breeding. GS score 30 hints. Indian economy. Water use efficiency. Gram trait will reduce the water requirements of the crops considerably, estimated to be 30% reduction, and can help the vast number of farmers who cultivate rind crops in the country in more than 100 million hectares. Similarly, the nitrogen use efficiency trait, which will reduce the use of nitrogenous fertilizer on the crops by an estimated 30%. Associated concepts. Investment and agriculture. Increase in investment, ramping up investment in modern irrigation techniques, adequate storage facilities for food grains to tide over a period of inadequate rainfall will help keep food grain prices in check. Link farmers to the market and improve farm and post-harvest infrastructure. Providing a favorable tax regime for the agriculture and related sectors can also help. The wasteful subsidy regime also needs to be overhauled. Fertilizer subsidies mostly benefit rich farmers and lead to gross overuse. Multiple smaller-scale water projects including irrigation ponds have been proposed to conserve water. Genetically modified plants suited to droughts might help, as would selecting more appropriate crops than thirsty rice and sugarcane in water-scarce regions. 17. Why the method of measurement of poverty in India has evoked lots of criticism in the recent past. Explain the similarities and differences between Tendulkar and Rangarajan committees in this regard. In your view, what should be the right approach to measure poverty in India? Unidimensional or multidimensional approach? Give reasons. Hints. According to critics, the government has deliberately kept poverty line low. The low poverty line has enabled the government to show that millions have moved out of poverty. This, critics say, is factually incorrect as the definition of poverty line is disputed. They also say that the data lacks statistical rigor and has been released to gain political mileage. Tendulkar and Rangarajan Committee. The expert group Tendulkar had used the All India Urban Poverty Line Basket as the reference to derive state-level rural and urban poverty. This was a departure from the earlier practice of using two separate poverty line baskets for rural and urban areas. The expert group Rangarajan reverted to the practice of having separate all Indian rural and urban poverty basket lines and deriving state-level rural and urban estimates from these. The expert group Tendulkar had decided not to anchor the poverty line to the then available official calorie norms used in all poverty estimations since 1979, as it found a poor correlation between food consumed and nutrition outcomes. However, the expert group Rangarajan took calorie intake into consideration, but reduced its importance. The expert group Rangarajan also backed NSSO's estimates and decides not to use the NAS estimates. This is in line with the approach taken by expert group Lakdawala and expert group Tendulkar. GS score. Hint: Indian economy 31. The expert group Rangarajan agreed with the methodology adopted by the expert group Tendulkar regarding overcoming the limitations of using fixed base year weights by using a combination of unit values derived from successive NSSO's consumer expenditure surveys and price relatives derived from the consumer price indices. The Multidimensional Poverty Index (MPI) identifies multiple deprivations, and that is why the index is known as multidimensional. Methodological significance of MPI is that it recognizes poverty from different dimensions compared to the conventional methodology that measures poverty only from the income or monetary terms. Similarly, there can be other measures like relative poverty line, which only measure people below certain threshold of income percentile. Europe uses this approach. Similarly, the global standard used by World Bank and USA is income poverty headcount method. The method which is also used by India handling to calorific intake. However, given the Indian scenario, the best approach would be to take the income or consumption-based poverty line determination, but perhaps we can have multiple poverty lines, like poorest, critically vulnerable, and vulnerable on the different income levels. That will give a stock of people completely dependent on state, partially dependent on state, etc. This will give proper insight into policy making. The Multidimensional Poverty Index is certainly superior, but it requires too much data and large base, collection of which can be an issue. Similarly, given India's large population base and regional diversity, it will significantly add to cost of government. Associated concepts: what is a poverty line? The poverty line defines a threshold income. Households earning below this threshold are considered poor. Different countries have different methods of defining the threshold income depending on local socio-economic needs. How is it measured? Poverty is measured based on consumer expenditure surveys of the National Sample Survey Organization. The poor household is defined as one with an expenditure level below a specific poverty line. What's the Indian poverty line? Earlier, India used to define the poverty line based on the method defined by a task force in 1979. It was based on expenditure for buying food worth 2,400 calories in rural areas and 2,100 calories in urban areas. In 2011, the Suresh Tendulkar Committee defined the poverty line on the basis of monthly spending on food, education, health, electricity, and transport. According to this estimate, the person who spends Rs. 27.2 in rural areas and Rs. 33.3 in urban areas a day are defined as living below the poverty line. For a family of 5 that spends less than Rs. 4,080 and Rs. 5,000 in rural and urban areas respectively is considered below the poverty line. This has been criticized for fixing the poverty line too low. According to a committee headed by former Reserve Bank Governor C. Rangarajan, there were 363 million people, or 29.5% of India's 1.2 billion people, who lived in poverty in 2011 to 12. The Rangarajan panel considered people living on less than Rs. 32 a day in rural areas and Rs. 47 a day in urban areas as poor. How is poverty measured in Europe? In most of Europe, the family with a net income of less than 60% of the median net disposable income, a broad measure of the national average income net of taxes, is counted as poor. GS score. 3 to hints. Indian economy. This would imply that a family in the United Kingdom would be poor if its current net income is less than £250, about Rs. 22,500 a week. The poverty line relative to the national average also gives an idea about the state of inequality. A sharp jump in the income of the richest will set the poverty line higher by pulling up the national average income. This could make the poor appear even poorer, though their incomes may have risen. How is it measured in the U.S.? The U.S. uses a much simpler method. The poverty line represents the basic cost of food for a family multiplied by 3. The threshold level is adjusted for inflation every year. The family is counted as poor if its pre-tax income is below this threshold. In 2011, the latest year for which data is available, the poverty threshold for a family of 4 stood at $22,811 about Rs. 11 lakhs then. There were 46 million such poor families, accounting for 15% of the U.S. population. Counting the poor, however, isn't as organized in developing countries such as India, partly because of a bustling cash economy that makes it difficult to capture income data. Instead, policymakers rely on data on family spending on essentials such as food, health, and basic utilities such as electricity. Economists point out that in least developed and middle-income countries in Asia and Africa, consumption expenditure serves as a reliable proxy of income, assuming the poorest of the poor people spend their entire earnings on survival. How does the Indian poverty scenario compare with the African countries? A comparison shows that Indian poverty line is abysmally low. For instance, South Africa had 3 poverty lines: food, middle, and upper, and all 3 were higher than that of India. The food poverty line in Indian rupees was Rs. 1,841 per capita per month in 2010, middle poverty line was at Rs. 2,445 and upper poverty line was at Rs. 3,484. Per capita poverty line of a rural adult Rwanda in Indian terms comes out to be Rs. 892 per month, slightly more than Rs. 816 for a person in rural India. One should not forget that prices of food items in Rwanda are less than in India.